The sermon title today is World Class. You'll find out later why I called it that, but it's a message on generosity. I read somewhere that the Mazatec Indians in southwest Mexico wish another person well, seldom wish another person well, and hesitate to even teach or share with one another. If you ask the village baker, "Where did you learn to make that bread?" he would say, "I just know," implying he learned without any help. This odd behavior stems from their concept of limited good. They believe that there's only so much good and knowledge and love to go around, and to teach another might give you less good or knowledge or love. And to love a second child means you have to love the first child less. To wish somebody a good day means you give away some of your own happiness. Now, in contrast to that story, it's told that a beggar was by the roadside asking for alms. And one day, Alexander the Great passed by. And the beggar kind of shied away from asking this mighty ruler for a handout. Nevertheless, the emperor threw him several gold coins. The courtier was amazed at the emperor's generosity, and he said, "Sir, copper coins would adequately meet this beggar's need. Why give him gold?" Alexander responded, "Copper coins would suit the beggar's need, but gold coins suit Alexander's giving." Siddhartha, or other known as Buddha, says, 1,000 candles can be lit from one single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. Last week, Janet talked about the beauty of God and humanity, and this week, as I mentioned, we're talking about generosity. That word comes from the Latin genus, which means kin or clan, the same root as genealogy or genius or genesis or gender. Up to the 16th century, generosity inferred being of noble birth or belonging to nobility. During the 17th century, the meaning changed to nobility of spirit rather than nobility of family. Traits of a noble spirit include gallantry, courage, strength, gentleness, and fairness. Later in the 18th century, the meaning evolved into munificence, or open-handedness, or liberality in giving money and possessions. Unfortunately, sometimes we think of generosity as a special trait of special people, rather than realizing that we all need to strive for generosity. It means that it's something more, something beyond the usual, that involves attitude and action. It's a basic, personal, moral orientation to life, extended for the well-being of another person. The virtue of generosity is present in all religions. In the Hebrew tradition, the faithful have a duty to God to show generous hospitality toward a stranger. You remember that from the Abraham and Sarah story. In Buddhism, generosity is one of the 10 perfections, and it's the antidote to greed. In Islam, the Quran states that whatever we give away generously with the intention of pleasing God, God will replace it. And for Christians, to be generous means to be conformed to Christ, who, though he was rich, yet for our sakes he became poor. One writer suggests that generosity is endangered in our world, dominated by contracts and economic exchange, which is conditional. Jesus' generosity is unconditional. Like the illustration of Alexander the Great, the world's giving is based on what suits the need. Jesus' giving is based on what suits God's unlimited love. I'd like to share a video from Simple Truths that compares middle class with world class. The term middle class doesn't refer to what's in your bank account or your social status. You could call it mediocrity. It's about your perspective on life. I think you'll get the point. Granted, these contrasts are rather stark, and it's obviously geared to the workplace. But let's review the points of difference commented on in the video. Frustrated versus grateful. Competitive versus creative. Avoiding risk versus managing risk. Feeling comfortable. Feeling comfortable being uncomfortable. Having or being. Pipe dreams or vision. Problem-oriented or solution-oriented. Playing the victim or taking responsibility. Knowing enough or eager to learn. Living with fear or growing through challenge. I don't know what you think about these contrasts, but here's how my gut reads middle class and world class. One is narrow and the other is expansive. One is smallness instead of fullness. One is nearsighted versus farsighted. Me-oriented instead of us-oriented. and we-oriented versus they-oriented. What strikes me is that generosity is a world-class perspective. It exudes a solid, mature, and open spirit. It's thinking beyond me and how things affect me. It's developed from this personal moral orientation to life. I spent a year in the Netherlands in my mid-20s, living with a Dutch Mennonite family and working in their printing shop. I learned about cultural traditions, like doing gift giving on December 6th instead of December 25. I learned that religious practices among Mennonites in Breskens, Holland, were not the same as in Scottsdale, Pennsylvania. Our group visited East Berlin before the wall came down, and having our passports confiscated at Checkpoint Charlie was uncomfortable, although we did get them back. Although I was an inexperienced traveler, I traveled alone to Florence, Italy, and Amman, Jordan. And there were some exciting times, and there were scary moments. It was a year of stretching, and not just my waistline. My world perspective would never be the same. I was becoming a world citizen with new appreciation and understanding of other cultures and countries. And as I've worked on this sermon on generosity, there's some significant principles I want to pull out. Number one, generosity begets generosity, and selfishness begets selfishness. You know the story of the father. This is a book, and I didn't have it, so I'm making this up. The story of a father who has a hard day at work and makes a cutting remark to his wife. The mother, in turn, yells at her daughter for watching TV instead of doing her homework. The sister yells at her little brother for making her spill the milk. The little brother kicks the dog. The dog thinks the boy wants to play and licks his face, and that makes the boy giggle. And he helps the sister wipe up the milk. The sister apologizes to her mother for watching TV and not doing her homework. And the mother massages the father's shoulders, and the father offers to make supper. Thank goodness for the dog who reversed that chain of negative actions. Someone reminded me that in our first capital campaign, the consultant told us the story of a little boy who had 50 cents weekly allowance, and he decided to give that to the church for the new building. His generosity inspired a businessman in the congregation to give $50,000. An I can attitude can be changed to I think I can with the right kind of example. Principle number 2, generosity works for the well-being of others. It's when another's happiness is more important than yours. I was very impressed once by a generous spirit of a friend. The friend's sister had made and sold handicrafts but never felt adequate or confident in her work. With tears in his eyes, my friend said, "Her work is exquisite. I would do anything to help her feel self-confident and accepted as an artisan." Jesus desires our well-being too. He longs for us to know and accept our worth in God's eyes. Principle 3, giving of ourselves creates positive energy. You know those days when you don't feel very good, but you do something for somebody else and it brightens your day and you no longer feel powerless. Happiness comes from cheerfully giving of our best and not expecting to receive. One person said, "He who gives what he would readily throw away gives without generosity, for the experience of generosity is self-sacrifice." Researchers at Cornell University conducted a holier-than-thou experiment comparing how generous people think they are and how generous they think others are. Invariably, people judge themselves to be more generous than they really are, and they think others are less generous. Principle 4. No discussion of generosity would be complete without gratitude for the loving generosity of the divine. Carol Mayhall tells a story about a woman who went to a diet center to lose weight. The director took her to a full-length mirror, and on it he outlined a figure and told her, this is what I want you to be like at the end of the program. Days of intense dieting and exercise followed, and every week the woman would stand in front of the mirror, discouraged because her bulging outline didn't fit the director's ideal. But she kept at it, and finally one day she conformed to the longed-for image. Jesus is that outline in the mirror against which we measure our transformation. Paul says, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, that you may discern what is the will of God. From this passage in Romans 12, using the Message words, let's look at it and compare how it confirms God's image. And it's curious how these scriptures correlate with the worldview. Similarities in Romans 12. Embrace God's gift. Give God your best. Don't quit in hard times. Stand up for what's wrong, to what's wrong. Be cheerfully expectant. Pay attention to God. Love from your heart. Do what God asks. Discover beauty in everyone. And live your passion. Generosity takes many forms, and Jesus is clear that we are to provide tangible help to those who are in need. Matthew 25:45 says, "Then they will answer, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in a prison and did not take care of you?' Then he will answer them, 'Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me.'" That's an overwhelming indictment, and I'm not sure how we carry that out perfectly every day. I like this little tongue-in-cheek quote from someone. When it comes to giving, some people stop at nothing. In addition to tangible generosity, there are simple spiritual gifts we can offer. Listening to another from a place of stillness, compassion and appreciation, or praying for another's wholeness. These are gifts of generosity. Over and over, I've heard many of you say, thank the congregation for the prayers and gifts that you received when you went through a tough time. Prayer and listening can make a difference. Someone added, we pray for those who have no one to pray for them. And if you remember, that was part of our invocation this morning. Here is an obvious measure of generosity. Pay attention to times when you use the terms we and they, expressing your opinion of right and wrong, good and bad, appropriate or not appropriate. Political parties do it. Church folk do it. Facebook friends do it. The accusation is, we do this and this, but they do that and that. And you can hear the name calling underneath the terms stupid, heathen, I'm better than you. Generosity draws people in. It doesn't separate and divide. So let's be careful when we use the terms we and they. In closing, Mother Teresa challenges us to be fundraisers, raising funds of love, of kindness, of understanding, and of peace. We can hold the world in our hands by sharing our gifts of generosity. And as Paul encouraged us, love from your heart. Discover beauty in everyone. Be cheerfully expectant. Live with passion. That's world-class generosity.